So this is the iPhone 13 and I have it running iOS 26 Beta 8. Let's see how it runs right now. So what is up guys, Nick here helping you to master your technology, and let's see how it runs. We're gonna go ahead and start this video with a boot up test on the iPhone 13. I also want to showcase to you the temperature here really quickly to start things because the phone is pretty cool to the touch right now. It's not super warm. So let's go ahead and start it up in 3, 2, go, and see how long this takes. So gotta wait for that Apple logo. And it shouldn't take incredibly long. These phones tend to boot up still relatively quickly. So that's a good thing, even though they're not on older software than the latest software with older chips, they still turn on relatively quick. You can see that phone turned on in just 17.35 seconds. So 4 years later, a phone that could still turn on in just 17 seconds, whether you're rebooting or something, that's pretty fast to get back into your phone. All right, so let's go ahead and see how it looks when it comes to unlocking the phone. You can see that new animation there for iOS 26. If I go ahead and show you here on iOS 18 on the iPhone 16, you can see that it's definitely got a different visual effect, but generally it kind of goes in at about the same speed. But the difference is that it does fly in a bit more. So you can see right there, it kind of just bounces in there. So definitely kind of visually pleasing. I think some people will enjoy that. Let's go ahead and confirm the build number. So if we go to settings here, we'll scroll down to general. We'll go to about, and you can see that we are looking at iOS 26 23A 5330A. So iOS 26 Beta 8. And let's go ahead and close these out now and kind of just generally scroll through the operating system. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that because the iPhone 13 has 60 hertz, of course, it's not going to scroll as smooth as the faster 120 hertz ProMotion phones. But I do notice that the bounce effects you can see in here, they look nice even on the 60 hertz phones. And I noticed that they tend to have these 60 hertz phones with 26 now looking better than ever. So if you do have a 16 plus, 15 plus, 14 plus, those type of phones, the animations got faster. So the phone generally should feel a little bit nicer than it used to. Although it's still not as good as ProMotion, it does feel a little bit better than the older 60 hertz phones. So if we kind of go over here and scroll, you'll see not a drastic difference, but when you swipe through these, they don't bounce quite as nice as on iOS 26 over here for the 13. Now the 16, I will put that on later, but I just wanted to keep it on 18 to show some of the differences. But generally going through the software itself, there's really no hiccups. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I can add controls, I can add things. It tends to perform quite well for general use. Very good casual phone still. All right, so let's go ahead and just open a few applications. That first one, not the greatest animation there. And you could see, definitely not looking quite as smooth as my 16 Pro Max. That does make a lot of sense. This is a slower, older phone. But what I will say is at least you get the nice visual effects here. Let's go ahead. And it really does kind of like revitalize the iPhone 13 lineup. So the phone itself tends to feel like a major change. So if I go ahead and swipe out of here, I go to Subway Surfers, you'll see this launches relatively fast. And I've heard some people say that they're going to dump their 13 this year simply because the 4 gigabytes of RAM is not enough. And that would make sense. That would make sense if you are hopping between a lot of different applications these days. In 2025, it does seem to matter a bit. Okay, so let's go into news, and you see that was open. You can see that the iOS 26 is making the animation much faster when coming out, although the 60 hertz and the 4 gigs of RAM is going to bog this one down just a bit by comparison to the newer devices. You can see right there, we're getting a total reload on Dead Trigger, reload on Subway Surfers. And so the RAM management is going to be great for the iPhone 13. Let's go into news. And if we go into Instagram, you'll see that was okay. Generally, it just doesn't have quite as snappy of a feel as a newer phone. So even with 26, while it is running okay, not quite as smooth. I also am feeling quite a bit of toasty heat here. Let's go ahead and check the temperature. You can see running rather toasty by comparison to 108.5. Yeah, 109. That's pretty toasty compared to 110 and rising. That's pretty warm compared to earlier. It was definitely a bit better than that. All right, so let's go ahead and do some real world usage. Now, my aim of this portion of the video is to kind of give you a look at what real world performance might look like on the phone. So let's go into Instagram. I'm gonna just pretend comment on one of these videos here. So iPad is a nice device. We'll go ahead and put fire right there. And then we'll come up out of here. We're gonna go into X right here. And as we scroll through, not a major issue. You can see that the Apple event is for September 9th for the iPhone 16. If I go back over here, that was still open. I'm going to go back to the calendar and maybe make an event here. iPhone 13 video review. And you can see if I was to save that, that wouldn't give me no issue. I'm going to click the emojis, swipe through each, and see I'm not getting any lag or anything like that when going through emojis or anything of that sort. Let's go ahead and swipe up out of there. Let's go into YouTube and click over here and look into music. As I go through these sub menus, that seems to perform just fine. Again, I am feeling a bit of heat, but generally using the phone like a regular person would, maybe make a calculation over here and then come back and go to the calendar to see what day that video review is. You can see that it tends to be okay. We did see a little bit of a jump there when coming out, but generally that animation is faster coming out. Now, if I want to play some casual games, I shouldn't have no major issues for this phone either. And so I do think for those of you upgrading to beta, the iOS 26, you're going to be quite happy with the changes. If we go over here and hit edit, let's go over here and hit edit. I would hit edit again. We'll see if it'll go that time. We'll hit customize. We'll go to the clear icons, see how those work. And you can see they take a second to load sometimes, but they seem to be doing okay for the iOS 26 with the liquid glass. Of course, the bouncing effect is just fine. Let's go ahead and add a widget here. And I'm gonna go ahead and look at the widgets. And you can see those seem to load okay as well. So definitely, I think even if you have this older phone, it's probably going to be a worthy update for you as well. Now let's go ahead and just kind of see how those sub menus and things look like they're here. So those actually look fine. So this is not like a major thing right here. It is a change in the UI, but it's not like it needs a lot of performance to do that. So you can see that's still going to work just fine. And you could also make the application bigger like that and turn it into a widget. So no major problems, I think, with most of real world use. The only issue is that if you want to relaunch games and stuff, you'll see that they're not ready to go all the time. Free Fire, we actually didn't really open that, but they're not always going to be ready to go. They might have a reload, like you'll see the bar reloading for the game or something like that. So I just think multitaskers, heavier multitaskers, would love the upgrade to the 17 because it's going to have much more RAM than this phone and be much faster while still giving you the same size you adore and love in the iPhone 13. So when it comes to the wildlife extreme scores for the iPhone 13, not an overly impressive result. We are looking at 11.5 FPS, 1915. It did maintain its performance pretty solid during the initial stages, but actually dropped at the start. This phone only scores better than 15% of other devices out there. In terms of score versus all devices, 33%. That means 67% of devices on the market are faster than the 13 right now. So you are no longer using anywhere near a top of the line performing phone anymore. But you're still using a really good one due to the software support and the good cameras on board. It's just there's so many phones that are much faster. Even in the mid-range, some phones are faster than this now. So we'll go ahead and run a Geekbench 6 and we'll see what kind of results we can get on the phone here on iOS 26 Beta 8. So our final Geekbench 6 score is in and we got a 2279 and a 5430. Now if we go take a look at single core scores, you'll see that it's pretty much significantly lower than the newer phones. But let's take a look at something maybe a year or so ago. So an iPhone 15 would get 2536. This got 2279. So it's mostly the 16 that has a major boost over the 13. So if you do have a 13, you'll want to go to a 16 or newer to feel a real upgrade. I would definitely wait. At this point, we're only a couple weeks away from the iPhone 17 anyway. So last thing I want to do before we get up out of here is go ahead and launch the camera. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, I always praise the iPhone 13 for having a really good camera, and you can see you now have a new camera design with iOS 26. So let's go ahead and do that. And the reason I praise this phone was because it was a very simplistic but also very reliable unit right here. So all you had to do was snap your photo, and pretty much 9 times out of 10, every result came out very good. Now, that's a pretty general statement. You could say that about most iPhones, but the thing is, the apertures change and stuff like that. This was one of the easiest point and shoot cameras ever made, and that goes for the entire 13 series, mostly because they utilized the 12 megapixel arrays, which were all very, very simple cameras, and they're kind of still the defaulted cameras that smartphones of higher end use today, unless you go ahead and manually put on your 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel, 200, whatever you're putting on there. Usually most camera phones default to 12 megapixel. This one was a 12 megapixel. So everything kind of just always looked like that normal standard smartphone photo you would want to take. And here in 2025, the photos still look fine, but we are trying to see how it runs, and you could see the camera runs pretty fine. Not seeing any issues when using the liquid glass to go through different modes, and you could see it's pretty much ready to go for most real world use. So the iPhone 13, I think I would definitely, if this was my only phone, I would definitely recommend doing the upgrade to iOS 26 when it does become official. So yeah, that's how it's running right now. You probably would want to do an upgrade if you want a longer battery life, lighter phone, better heat management, better performance in gaming, and mostly better performance in multitasking. But other than that, as a casual use phone, the iPhone 13 is holding up pretty okay here for being nearly 4 years old. So iPhone definitely retaining that very, very strong performance and longevity with a long-term experience. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know if you want to see more iOS 26, how does it run videos. I'll consider doing some more. I'll catch you on the next one. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.